Somewhere along the way, we are all handed an invisible checklist for success, and nobody tells us that most of it is fake. Today, we're breaking down the things we think we need to do to succeed that actually don't matter nearly as much as we've been led to believe. All right, let's do it. Welcome back to the Main and Laura podcast with your host, Laura. Today's episode is for anyone who feels like they're doing everything right, but still feel behind, exhausted, or like they're missing something. Because the truth is, we've been sold a very specific, very dramatic version of success, and a lot of it, it's completely unnecessary, to be honest. So let's talk about the myths, the habits, the pressure, the things we think are quote unquote required that actually don't matter nearly as much as we think. Are you ready? All right. So the first one is, you probably already know this one, is waking up bright and early before the birds even wake up at 5 a.m., 4, whatever. We are really convinced that waking up early is sort of like a personality trait. And somehow productivity culture has decided that success only happens before sunrise. Research on circadian rhythms actually shows that people have very different biological clocks. So this doesn't work for everyone. Some people genuinely function better at night, myself included. Some people peak midday. Some are morning people, and that's great for them. But success isn't really about when you wake up. It's really about what you do with the time and the hours that work best for you. You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. to have a good routine. You actually need a routine that matches your nervous system. I used to wake up, if you know, like in my military days, I used to have to wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And at that time, that definitely worked. But I came to realize that, yes, I am definitely more of a night person. And waking up during those hours, I actually get a little bit triggered from those days. And I dread actually waking up so damn early. So don't feel bad if you're just not into it. The second one is you need to have it all figured out early in life. But there's this belief that if you don't know exactly what you're doing by the time you graduate high school, college, whatever, you're already behind. But studies on career development show that most people change careers multiple times, and that late bloomers often experience higher long-term satisfaction. Most successful people actually don't have any idea what they want to do. It's very rare that you can say, okay, I want to be a teacher and this is going to be my life mission and everything's going to work out perfectly and there's no reason for me to switch careers, nothing, right? Nothing is ever perfect. In most cases, it involves a lot of self-exploring. You try, you adjust, you pivot, you fail, you try again, you figure out what you really want, what you really need. And clarity doesn't necessarily come before action, it comes from action. By exploring different things is when you learn what you actually want and don't want. So if you feel like you are going on the wrong career path, you are doing the wrong thing, you're studying the wrong major, don't fret. This is absolutely normal. And eventually you figure it out. You figure out what works for you. You'll get there eventually. Give yourself a little patience and you'll be fine. The third one is you have to be busy to be important or to feel important. In all honesty, busyness has become this sort of status symbol where if you're not absolutely exhausted, dying from all the work you've accomplished, are you really even trying? Of course, startup culture has kind of made us believe that this is the case. But the thing is that constant busyness is often a sign of, you guessed it, poor boundaries, not necessarily success. Just because you're working night and day doesn't mean that you're being successful at something. Research on productivity has consistently shown that rest does improve performance, downtime boosts creativity, burnout definitely lowers effectiveness. So the longer you're sitting at your desk doing work, the less efficient you're going to be over time because you're going to burn out. Being overwhelmed doesn't mean that you're doing something right. It usually means that you're doing probably a little too much. The next one is kind of aligned with the last one, is the idea that you have to hustle 24/7. There's no time. There's no downtime. Hustle, hustle, hustle. Hustle culture has overtaken our lives. And that hustle narrative, if you've been on LinkedIn, you know what I'm talking about, right? Is if you're not grinding, then somebody else is grinding. And eventually they're going to take your job. They're going to take over the world and you're going to be left behind. But the reality is sustainable success requires recovery. It requires reflection. If you're not stopping to reflect on what you've achieved, if you're not stopping to reflect on the things that you're actually doing and how far you've gone or have been, then it eventually is going to make you guessed it, burn out. When you think of elite athletes, they don't necessarily train nonstop. Now, yes, you could think of people like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant who always emphasize the idea of always him being in the gym, always working, right? Always shooting at the gym, etc. Yes, there could be those outliers who are absolutely obsessed with their craft. But if you're always at the gym working out, chances are that you're going to have a higher chance of getting hurt. That's why when you go to a gym, one day you do legs, one day you do upper body. The body needs that recovery so that the muscles can actually continue to work on building itself. So if you're constantly working on the same muscle, you're not giving it time to recover. And in turn, when you think of these athletes, they could eventually injure themselves because they're not giving their body enough rest. So that's why these athletes tend to rest strategically, right? You can't play ball if you're in crutches. And if you injure yourself because you were training one day, shooting hoops, and hey, guess what? That wasn't an actual game. I was just training like I do every day. Well, yes, eventually it's going to affect you. So give yourself enough time to rest. Success is built through consistency. It is not built through constant exhaustion. The next one is needing everyone's approval. And this one could get a little sneaky because we think that if people don't understand our choices, then we must be doing something wrong. And so when you're constantly looking for approval of others, it doesn't matter how well you think you're doing. If you're constantly depending on other people's approval, you're going to doubt yourself. And so in turn, you may start messing up. You may start doubting your work. You may start doubting your craft. You may start doubting how amazing you are. Every meaningful path looks confusing from the outside. And when you look at research in social psychology, it tells us that people project their fears onto unconventional choices. So if they're not familiar with those choices, if they're not familiar with the things that you're doing, chances are they're going to critique it very differently than someone who, for example, has been doing it for many years. So it often means that you're choosing something unfamiliar to them. It doesn't mean that you need to stop doing it. It just means that eventually they'll have to just become familiar. Just tell them, hey, get familiar with what I'm doing because it's not going anywhere. I guess I'm 50-50 on this one because there's a huge difference between appearing successful and being successful. Looking successful often means spending money to impress other people, saying yes when you should say no. We talked about that on the last episode. Staying in situations that drain you, when in fact, real success often looks pretty boring. It looks like stability, it looks like peace, aligned routines, slow and steady growth, quiet confidence. Not everything that is meaningful is actually very loud. Rich, quick schemes tend to be very loud, right? Like, hey, you could make triple your money. They're always trying to get your attention. Maybe just investing in good old-fashioned stock market is enough. Investing in real estate, it's pretty boring, but it's one of the most stable investments you could ever find. And if you think that you have to buy the fanciest clothing, the most expensive brands in order to look your best, absolutely not. Don't think that you have to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars in order to look your best, because you don't. I've gotten some really cute outfits from random stores, even thrifting, right? Where you could find absolutely wonderful gems in there. At the end of the day, as long as you're comfortable with what you're wearing, as long as you're comfortable with how you look and you look presentable, you look clean and chic and put together, right? Like your clothes are ironed, The rest doesn't really matter. Just do your best. And again, not everything meaningful needs to be loud. Now, I know there's also the assumption that you need to suffer for something in order for it to feel deserving. You need to suffer in order for things to really count. And that is absolute BS because somewhere along the way, we have internalized that idea that if something doesn't hurt, if something is not putting us through the ringer, it's not legitimate. And that's absolutely not true. But success doesn't require misery. I actually want to spend a whole podcast on this topic because I notice this all the time. It's like people just want to be miserable on purpose because somehow maybe they feel alive as a result. I'm telling you right now, growth doesn't require constant struggle. It does not. Okay. And the older you become, the more you're going to realize. And when you see people in their 40s and 50s and 60s taking a chill pill, not worrying about much, trust me, they have learned. Okay, that it is not worth it, especially for your health. So ease doesn't mean laziness. It doesn't mean you're not achieving anything. It actually means alignment. It means you found your perfect groove. You're allowed to build a life that feels good and meaningful. So don't ever think that you have to go through a million steps to get to where you want to be. You don't. Just be smarter. Be strategic about what you want. Make a plan. And if it's making you suffer, guess what? You probably don't belong there. I do have a confession to make now that we're talking about things that we are supposed to be doing. Yes, I have achieved many great things in my life. And despite all of that, I hate to admit that I'm actually not a manifester. I don't manifest. I create lists. Okay, I write down the top 5 things I want to do and I write them in a piece of paper and then I just look at it every so often and I check them off as I go. That's how I manifest. It has to be logical to me. So if you're not a manifester, don't feel bad. Just find what works for you. Same thing for me. I don't journal. I absolutely hate journaling. And I know some of you probably love journaling and you're probably like, well, how are you doing this podcast? And you're trying to encourage people to do things. I am actually doing it because I am not a journaler. And if you've ever gifted me a journal, I'm sorry to tell you this, it's probably sitting somewhere collecting dust. I actually hate it. I hate putting things on paper that I have to go back and reflect on and think about because usually it just reminds me of a diary and going through the motions about things. I don't like it. So if you're not into it, you're fine. Okay. You can achieve things without doing journaling. I promise you. If most of the rules don't matter, then what actually matters? And here's what research tells us, and I guess lived experience would agree as well, is that consistency matters more than intensity. Self-trust, trusting yourself and what you want and what you believe in is more important than external validation. Resting is crucial in order to avoid burnout. Curiosity is highly required, in my opinion, over rigid plans. So again, if you feel like you need to create this absolute plan of step by step, everything needs to be perfect, absolutely not. Just be curious and flow through things and you'll figure things out. And actually, you may even find yourself liking other things more than what you expected. So it's very much a great journey to go through. Alignment is more important than aesthetics. Aligning yourself with what you want instead of what other people want for you, instead of what you think other people expect of you, is not the way to go. And progress is what will give you grace. Perfection does not. Always give yourself grace because success isn't always a checklist. It isn't always a set plan. It's a relationship that you build with yourself, with your energy, your values, and your choices. So right now, I want you to ask yourself, what is that one thing that you've been forcing yourself to do because you think you should, and not because it actually helps you? You know, are you journaling every night? Are you meditating? Are you manifesting? You know, is it getting you somewhere? Think about it. I mean, how much is it actually helping you? And it doesn't mean that it's wrong, okay? I don't want you to think that at all. I just want you to understand that whatever plan works for other people does not necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. If all you want to do is write stickies on a wall, then do that. If all you want to do is go on a walk and talk to yourself as you think through your plans and that gets you excited, do that. Never think that what works for everyone else, it's what's meant to work for you. What would happen if you let that go? The relief that you feel is a sign that you're definitely onto something. So don't ignore it. You don't need to wake up earlier, do more, hustle harder, prove yourself constantly to be successful. You need to know yourself first. You need to trust yourself and build your life from that place. Because remember, when you were a kid and you had those big dreams, you weren't always sure of how you were going to do them, right? How you were going to achieve them. But you had that imagination, and that was enough. So I want you to build your life from that place. It's going to work out, I promise. All right, everyone. So if this episode made you feel a little lighter, a little less pressured, I hope, just enjoy your life. Don't take life so seriously. This life is meant to be enjoyed. If you have a plan, make a plan, but do it your way. So again, if this helped you, share it with someone who's carrying unnecessary pressure. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.